Hi girls, Nanny here. Hope you've had a good day. So it's story time. Can you remember what we read yesterday? Can I hear you? Can you shout it really loud? Can you remember? It was Mr. Small, wasn't it? So that was yesterday's story. So today, as promised, I've got another Mr. Men story. I've just remembered, make sure Mummy and Daddy aren't in the room. I haven't said that for a long time, have I? So hopefully they're out slaving away doing the tea or something. Not just sitting on their backsides being lazy. Right, so today's story is Mr. Can you read it? Mr. Funny. So it's the same sort of book with the stickers and the colour, and you need to colour them in. So once I've finished this one, I'll send them both off to you. So let's find out about Mr. Funny. Oh, and on this page, I've just noticed, this is written by Roger Hargreaves, and then there's a space to write your name there as well, because you're going to do the sticking and the colouring in. So, good. Right, let's go. Mr. Funny lived in a teapot. It had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen, a living room, and it suited Mr. Funny very nicely. One day, Mr. Funny was having lunch. He wasn't very hungry, so he only had a daisy sandwich and a glass of toast. Delicious, he murmured to himself as he finished his funny lunch. After lunch, Mr. Funny decided to go for a drive in his car. Mr. Funny's car was a shoe. Have you ever seen a car that looks like a shoe? It looks very funny. As he drove along, everybody who saw him laughed to see such a funny sight. He passed a worm at the side of the road. The worm thought Mr. Funny in his funny car was the funniest thing he had ever seen. He nearly laughed himself in two. He passed a pig in the field. The pig thought Mr. Funny in his funny car was the funniest thing she had ever seen. She nearly laughed her tail off. Even the flowers he passed thought that Mr. Funny was the funniest thing they had ever seen. They nearly laughed themselves to the ground. Eventually, Mr. Funny came to a crossroads. He didn't know which way to go, so he looked at the signpost. One of the signs said, "To the..." Any ideas? Zoo. To the zoo. That will be fun, thought Mr. Funny to himself, so he drove his shoe towards the zoo. When he arrived at the gate of the zoo, he stopped. It was closed. "I'm sorry," said the zookeeper. "We've had to close the zoo because all the animals have colds and they're all feeling very sorry for themselves." "Oh dear," said Mr. Funny, and then he thought, "Perhaps I can help to cheer them up," he said. "Well," said the zookeeper, "it's worth a try," and he opened the gate. Mr. Funny drove into the zoo in his shoe. The first thing he saw was an elephant. It was true. The elephant was feeling very sorry for herself. Very sorry indeed. Mr. Funny stood and looked at the sad-looking elephant, and the sad-looking elephant stood and looked at Mr. Funny. Oh dear. Then do you know what Mr. Funny did? He pulled a funny face. Mr. Funny, as you'd imagine, is very good at pulling funny faces. The elephant giggled. She'd never seen anything so funny. Mr. Funny pulled another funny face. The elephant burst out laughing. The elephant laughed and laughed and laughed. She laughed so hard she nearly laughed her trunk off. And she felt a lot better. Mr. Funny went over to the lion house. There was a lion, feeling extraordinarily sorry for himself. Mr. Funny stood and looked at the sad-looking lion, and the sad-looking lion stood and looked at Mr. Funny. "Oh dear," And then Mr. Funny pulled the funniest looking face that's probably ever been pulled anywhere ever. Now, you've heard a lion roar before, haven't you? Well, this lion roared too, with laughter. He laughed so hard, he nearly laughed his whiskers to pieces. Then Mr. Funny went around to see all the other animals in the zoo. Oh dear, what a miserable looking lot. For all of them, Mr. Funny pulled funnier and funnier faces. The big brown bear giggled and then burst out laughing. And the giraffe laughed so hard, she nearly laughed her neck into a knot. And the hippopotamus nearly laughed himself out of his skin. And the penguins nearly laughed their flippers floppy. And the leopard, well, you really should have seen him. He laughed so hard, he nearly laughed his spots off. What pandemonium! Oh, Mr. Funny, giggled the zookeeper, who had started laughing as well. Oh, Mr. Funny, thank you very, very much indeed for coming to cheer us all up. Oh, it was nothing really, replied Mr. Funny modestly, and drove off in his shoe. Later, when Mr. Funny arrived home, he chuckled to himself. Well, he said, that's the end of another funny day. And he parked his shoe and went inside his teapot, and because he was feeling thirsty, he made himself... Can anyone guess? Did he make himself a cup of tea, do you think? Shall we see what he made himself? Oh, a nice hot cup of cake. Oh, he is funny, isn't he? So if you remember on the last book, at the bottom, it says, I finished this book on, and you put the date, and I am how many years old. So you have to put how old you are in there when you get the book. And the stickers that are all on the front, they stick on this side of the page where it says, put your sticker here. Now copy and colour it in. So what you do is you have to go round and put all your stickers on the right pages, and then you try and copy it the right colours. But if you don't have exactly the same colours, I'm sure it won't matter. Well, I enjoyed those books. What's Grandad doing? Why is he looking at Colin?
Smiling.
Oh, he's smiling. Did they enjoy it? He's a bit sleepy still. I think he's a bit feeling a bit unhappy. Perhaps we ought to get Mr. Funny to come and see him. Anyway, girls, hope you enjoyed that. And here they are. What we're going to do is we're going to pop them in the post. It may take a couple of days to get there. And we'll see you soon. Bye.